Hello and welcome to Soul Talk with Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mandel. Rabbi Aaron, we live life forward and sometimes look back and have regrets. And I have a feeling as a rabbi who counsels lots of people, there are different time periods in people's lives where they will come to you with regrets about how they lived their life. And had they thought about it ahead of time, moving forward, they would have made different choices. And we're all at different stages of life, and we can always move forward from where we're at right now. But are there common themes that you hear people come to you with as far as looking back on certain decisions in life or certain situations that had they thought about it ahead of time proactively, people would have done differently with different results? What are situations that you hear of that people look back and regret that can help us think looking forward how to make better choices?
Honestly, I don't remember any specific cases in terms of what a person said they regret. But what I do remember is my standard response to when people regret the past, that, what Torah teaches is that what happens is in the hands of Hashem, in the hands of God. The choices you make are your choices. There's a basic principle in the Talmud, Hakol bidei Shemayim chutz miyirat Shemayim. All is in the hands of God, except for one's reverence for God. And that basically means that your ultimate choice is in your attitude. So let's say a person decides, God forbid, that they're going to kill somebody, and they get a gun, and they've chosen to commit murder. They have the ability to choose to commit murder, but they don't have the ability to finalize that murder. They could pull the trigger and the bullet's a dud. They could pull the trigger and the trigger jams. They could pull the trigger and the victim moves. From my choice to the results of my choice, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity and for God to get in the way. And so we really, really, really shouldn't be looking back and saying everything would have been different. What would have been different is the choices that you make, but not the consequences of the choices. I know that's kind of hard to, swallow, because a lot of people have this attitude that, my choice definitely ends up with the consequence that I chose to generate. But no, there's what's in your hands and what's in God's hand. What's in your hands is the choice. What's in God's hand is the results of your choice. And therefore, when a person looks back, they have to say to themselves, look, at whatever happened, happened. I regret the choices I made. I regret the attitude I adopted, and I made bad choices. And what people need to understand is your choices don't determine what happens. Your choices do something a lot more serious. They determine how you define yourself. Do you define yourself as someone who seeks to be aligned with the will of God and the vision and the values of God? Or do you define yourself as somebody who's out of sync with the divine? But it's about the choices, not the results of the choices. The results of the choices are in God's hands. The choice themselves are in your hands, and they determine how you understand yourself, experience yourself, and define who you really are.
So, what you're sharing to a certain degree is comforting and I would say empowering, but it's also challenging. I guess because I'm just thinking about, let's say, a certain kind of scenario. Well, let's say a person made a certain choice to work a lot, and that came at the expense of having time with, let's say, family or their spouse, and as a result of that, their marriage and their family life deteriorated, and then they look back and regret the choice they made to prioritize work over family. Just as a scenario, to a certain degree, wouldn't that choice that person made created certain consequences? And so, on the one hand, I guess in theory, recognize what you're saying about the choice, the consequences aren't really up to us. On the other hand, I'm just trying to think of how this plays out in a scenario like that.
Well, Judaism has a very paradoxical understanding of the relationship between choice and the consequence of the choice. When a person looks back with 2020 hindsight, that was God's plan. If that's what happened, that was God's plan. When we look 2020 foresight, it's all an open field and it's my choice. So should I not regret what happened in the past? No, you should regret the choices that you made. You chose to neglect your family. But what happened happened. There could have been other things that could have come up, and maybe someone in your family would have gotten sick, and that would have forced you to be more attentive to your family. I don't know. I don't know. But the best way to live your life is to look back and accept what happened was part of God's plan and only good could come out of it. Even though I made the wrong choices, I repent over the choices I make and I choose a new future. And that's the way I think. I think it's the healthiest way to look at things in our life, that what happened was God's plan and there must be good that will come out of it, even though I made choices that I deeply regret. But if it happened, then it must have been God's choice.
Hmm.
But now I don't know the future, so I don't know what's going to happen. So there I have to make choices and not say, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's up to God. No, no. You have to make choices going forward and regret the choices going backwards, but not regret what happened, because what happened was in God's hand. And now you just try and use your past to chart out a new future.
I'm realizing to a certain degree, I think one of the challenges people often face is that we can put so much effort into something, and then if there aren't the results we were hoping for, it feels like it was a waste. That feels like a waste. But what you're sharing here is that the control we have is over the choices, over the effort, and the results anyhow aren't in our hands. Which means if things work out fantastically well, then I can own the choices I made to try to lead towards that, but the result wasn't up to me, it was up to God. And if things fail dismally, so to speak, from my perspective, again, if I can own the choices that I made along the way, and if the choices were right and good, then the results, whether they work out well or not, you're saying really aren't in our hands. It's the choices we make in between. So that's what I need to examine.
That's right. We should be really evaluating ourselves and our success based on the honesty, the authenticity, and the integrity of the choices that we make. The results of those choices are in God's hands. So a person could choose to kill somebody and that victim got away, but they did choose to kill somebody. Or a person could choose to save somebody's life and somehow the circumstances didn't enable that to happen. But you did make a great choice. And so, but this is so counterintuitive because most people, they base their success on what happens and don't pay much attention or give much value to the choices they made. They just want results. It's about results, and in Judaism, the result is the integrity and the God consciousness that you generate in your life by making good choices and moral, spiritual value choices.
So then, in a sense, meaning the idea of looking back and having regrets is really actually should only be servicing future choices. If I get stuck
That's
in the
right.
regret,
I regret the choices I made, but for me to say everything would have been different and live with that pain that everything would have been different had I made a different choice. No, if it happened, then it wouldn't have been different. I know that doesn't, in our minds, the way things look, no, it would have been different, but really, what happened, happened. Let go of it. You can't change what happened. But what you can do is learn from what happened and make new choices and define yourself in a new way so you make better choices. But what happened happened, and if it happened, if that's the results, those are the results. I regret the choices I made, and I think I want to share with you a story about a fellow who was caught in a car that was stolen, and the police bring him in and he's taken to court, and the court says, did you steal that car? He says, no, I didn't. He said, well, you were in the car, it's a stolen car. He says, no, you don't understand, I'm not responsible. He said, what do you mean you're not responsible? He said, well, I was walking down the street and this guy parks his car in a very dangerous neighborhood. The policeman came up to him and said, sir, I will guarantee you that this car, if you leave it here, will be stolen. Well, the guy didn't listen, so I took the car. So the court says, what do you mean? So then you stole the car? He says, no, it would have been stolen anyways. That's right. And you volunteered to do the job, so you go to jail for the job. It's true. The car would have been stolen, but you chose to volunteer to be the one who steals it. So what happens, happens, but that doesn't absolve you from the responsibility you chose. And you've now become a conduit for that to happen. So a person should feel like, well, that person would have died anyways. Yeah, but it wouldn't have been through your hands. You volunteered to be the conduit for this person's death, and you will pay the punishment for that. You will pay the penalty for that.
so I guess the challenge is if I will make better choices or different choices in the future, then I do need to take responsibility for the poor choices I made in the past, and to some degree, I guess, have some regrets about the poor choices and seeing certain consequences came from it. But I guess without taking the responsibility, it's unlikely I will necessarily make changes about the future, because if the consequences are everyone else's fault and not because of the choices I made on my end, then there's nothing I need to change, and therefore the bad choices can continue. So to take responsibility is the first step towards making a change.
Absolutely. It goes back to how do you define yourself? Are you choosing to define yourself as one who seeks to always be aligned with God's will, a will of morality and goodness and compassion? Or do you seek to make choices that is not aligned with God's will? And that defines who you are. What kind of person are you? Are you a person that seeks to be in sync with God? Or are you a person that wants to sink in the flood of your own mistakes?
I think one of the challenges is that we are very good at justifying ourselves, and especially if we can sometimes say there's like to say different kinds of values, and one might say, well, the value of making sure I can give nice donations to charity and live in a really big house and provide for my family. I'm just thinking as an example. That value sometimes, and that can justify all the things I'm doing, maybe not being around much because I'm supporting my family. But on the other hand, there's also the value of having time with your family and that quality time. And I think sometimes we get these blind spots when we'll justify, so to speak, certain behaviors based on that we're giving a value attached to it. We might even say it's a godly value. So how do we help clarify which values need to take priority over others, especially in the realm of serving God?
Well, look at there's the foundational value of all of Judaism is love your neighbor as yourself. And all of Judaism, all the laws of Judaism are there to serve, to fulfill that basic value. And the person needs a mentor. I mean, Judaism has a very clear guideline how to behave, but not every situation is written in black and white. And so you go to a mentor who has the who has the knowledge of the general principles of Judaism and can give you guidance.
The mentor is extremely important because I'm realizing we usually can't see ourselves objectively. And I think as human nature, we have a real tendency to justify ourselves. So I can even think of an example of, there's so many examples, but another one would be, let's say, a parent who in the realm, I need to educate my child, but what they don't see is that they're actually extremely critical, very negative, and they're pushing the child away. And the message that they're trying to convey in the name of educating a child, being a good parent, is actually being counterproductive. But we don't see ourselves. It's a challenge. So it's almost like you're saying a mentor can sometimes reflect back at us what we maybe can't see within ourselves.
Absolutely.
That's oftentimes, I think, the challenge that we face when it comes to, again, living life forward and priorities as opposed to regrets about decisions made, is that I think we're so close to our own lives that sometimes we can't fully see how the choices we're making are creating certain realities for ourselves. And again, even though on the one hand, there's important to remember, as you're saying, that the consequences are not in our hands. But if we're going to take responsibility to make better choices for the future, if we don't see that we're not making good choices, it's hard to do that.
Right. Well, this is one of the great challenges of being human, to step away from yourself and take a look at yourself from another person's point of view, or get another person's point of view and have the humility to ask people their advice and how do they see things and what do they think about what you're sharing, because everybody has a story and sometimes people get stuck in their story and they make choices based on a story that they've concocted for themselves that is not really stringing together the facts.
So I guess one way to check ourselves is if, on the one hand, if everything seems well and peaceful within my inner world and with all my relationships and my life in general seems to be in a healthy place, then hopefully that's a sign that choices I'm making within the realm of control, circle that I can make those choices, might be going down a good path. But if a person finds that they don't have inner peace and that they have a lot of relationships that aren't working very well, that might be a sort of a sign to say, hey, I can't see where maybe some of my choices within this are pushing things off track. Maybe I need to consult with somebody else who can have a different angle on seeing what's going on. They can give me some perspective about maybe some changes that could have an effect.
Yeah, but even if things are going well, I think it's a good idea to check in with somebody and get their thoughts, because it could be that your choices are not good, even though you're getting the results that you want, but you're not making the right choices. And that's the point. Most people base their choices on the results rather than understand that the ultimate result is the integrity of your choices.
That's a very important point that you're making. And it's true, because I think sometimes we can think, I didn't get the results I want. This must not be the right way to go about it. But it might be the right way to go about it. It's just sometimes the right way is not always the easy way. Sometimes it's more.
Look, a person might choose to take a job And then 3 months later, they realize this is terrible and say, oh my gosh, how did I make such a stupid choice? Maybe it wasn't a stupid choice. Maybe that was a smart choice and an important choice that you needed to learn something in those 3 months so you could make the next choice to get the right job.
So that really comes down to also the attitude about how do we live our lives. And you're pointing out something very important. It doesn't mean I shouldn't, that a change may not make sense for the future, but the attitude I have is, oh, this was a bad decision and I made a mistake, and having regret, as opposed to saying, well, for some reason there's something good about this choice because it's created a growth opportunity, maybe more clarity for what it is I need in the future, but it doesn't mean that I now shouldn't make another choice that might be better.
Absolutely. The first choice is to always look for the opportunity in whatever situation I'm in. What can I learn from this experience? How can I use this experience to make a better choice in the future?
So, what it really comes down to is the choice of perspective of what's the perspective I take on any aspect of my life. And if the perspective is always something good, there's something to learn from this, or there's something good that will come out of this, it's a whole different way of making choices in life than always looking back and seeing the negative side of things and feeling like things were a waste or just futile.
Right. I think a person should take the attitude that whatever happens is not happening to me, but happening for me. And there's some kind of opportunity of growth, of clarity, of motivation. And I choose to look for the opportunity of growth in whatever situation I'm in.
And maybe that's why when I asked you, is it common for you to have people with regrets about life? And you say it's not something that specifically comes into your mind space, is because you yourself help people come to the perspective of life needs to be moved forward and there's no mistakes as far as this negative results were from what you chose. Meaning, what are you learning from the experiences you had in life, and how are you going to take that learning forward? If this is a
Absolutely.
perspective you live with, it's also a perspective you're obviously giving to the people who come for counsel.
Yeah, when I was a teenager and somebody taught me how to drive, he told me that you take a quick look back in order to know how to go forward. If you're going to make a turn or you take another lane, you take a quick look back. You look in the rear view mirror, but there's a blind spot, so you take a quick look back. And that basically, I learned from that, you look back only if it helps you move forward. But if you look back and it doesn't help you move forward, that's a mistake.
And with living with that perspective and that vantage point, I can see how a person always is going to feel like, instead of getting stuck, I'm thinking if you look in the rearview mirror for too long, you'll actually probably get yourself into an accident, and then you'll, instead of moving forward, you're going to be stuck for a
Right.
while.
Well, a lot of people are stuck in the past and don't let the past pass and let the past move them and push them towards a new future. But if you keep looking back and you're looking back that in a way that doesn't help you move forward, then your looking back is not going to help you.
So really, the big lesson to take is that we have to continuously, no matter what, live life forward. And anytime we might look back with regret, the only reason to do that is to continue to move forward and make choices that you think, based on whatever you've learned from the past, is going to make for a better choice for the future. But our eyes
Absolutely.
should almost continually be looking forward.
Beautiful. Exactly.
I want to thank you all for joining us, Soul Talk, Rabbi David Aaron and Leora Mann.